Hello, good evening, and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome to our weekly webinars. Give me 5 to 6 minutes of your time. I have few important announcements to make. Number one, for the civil services examination, you need static content and the dynamic content information. Dynamic content, which means current affairs. For the static content, you may be a student of the tablet learning program or the live online classroom program. For the static content, please rely on the tablet or the live classes, or for that matter, the offline classes if you are an offline classroom student. For the dynamic content, for the current affairs, we have two broad set of offerings. One is text-based current affairs. The other is video-based current affairs. Video-based current affairs, for example, on YouTube, daily The Hindu newspaper analysis, daily quiz, weekly explained videos, international relations this week, economy this week. We also have current affairs webinars on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Then we have text-based content in the form of monthly current affairs magazine, the gist of comprehensive news analysis, what we call it, the gist of newspapers, the summary, the gist of Yojana, Kurukshetra, EPW, Geography and You. There is a content overload. And we get some responses from the students, sir, is there any way we can pick and choose? Are there some content offerings which we must rely upon, which we cannot miss? And there are some content offerings which we can skip. Please tell us, because if we consume everything, then we don't have to study anything but the current affairs. I think that should be a question on your mind as well. And today we are trying to, and we are going to simplify it for you. Now listen to me carefully. This is all for your benefit. If you don't have time, I repeat, if you don't have time, don't follow any video that we upload on YouTube. I'm making a big statement, but this is for your benefit. Whether it is daily newspaper analysis, daily quiz, international relations this week, economy this week, explained videos. If you have time, please follow. If you don't have time, please skip. You're not going to lose out anything. Then what do you need to do? Follow the current affairs webinars that we have every week, twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Follow the monthly current affairs magazine that we have. It should be more than enough for you to clear the civil services examination. And for that, we have now modified the current affairs webinars. You might have got the sense of it when you received the mailer. What we have done is now Tuesday's webinars will be prelims focused. We'll be focusing entirely, exclusively on the prelims examination when it comes to the webinars every Tuesday. Webinars every Thursday, we have segregated, we have categorized into GS papers. So first Thursday of the month, we will be focusing on mains current affairs when it comes to GS1 and GS2. Second Thursday of the month, we will be focusing on economy, disaster management, internal security. Third Thursday of the month, we'll be focusing on geography, we'll be focusing on environment and ecology, science and technology. And the fourth Thursday of the month, the most important one, we will help you write better, cogent answers to current affairs questions that is asked in your mains examination. So we'll be picking up questions, we'll provide you the model answers, and we will tell you how you should have written the answers to these questions. The sources remain the same. We will still pick content from the Hindu, Indian Express, Yojana, Kurukshetra, EPW, Down to Earth, Geography and You, AIR Spotlight, Sunset TV, but only our approach will be different. And the approach is we will be now focusing GS paper wise. Instead of having a webinar on Yojana and Kurukshetra, we will pick polity related topics and will cover in the first Thursday of the month. Science and tech, environment related topics, we will cover the third Thursday of the month. This way, we are going to ensure that you have one-stop solution, one-stop destination for all your current affairs requirements. So please rely on the weekly webinars that we have and rely on the monthly current affairs magazine that we have. That's it. But at the same time, before every webinar, we would give you handouts. And I'm sure majority of you don't read those handouts. And ultimately, they are occupying beautiful positions in your dustbin. Now, what we have done, we will not provide you the handout after every webinar or before every webinar. Instead, we will provide you the annotated PPTs. Whatever I'm going to write on the PPT, you can find the annotated PPT on your app. You can download it and read it. But sir, we also need the content. We also need the written content. We're going to provide you that as well, but in the form of current affairs magazines, monthly current affairs magazines. So all the topics that we will discuss in these webinars, beautiful, crisp notes of these topics will be provided to you in the form of current affairs magazines, so that you rely on current affairs magazine for all your text-based requirements, rely on videos for all the analysis, and we will try and ensure that in these webinars we cover those topics where conceptual understanding is required, where deep insights are required, where analytical understanding is required, where you have the possibility of various doubts, and we will get these doubts cleared. Clear? So that is the intention. These are the important announcements that I wanted to make before we start this webinar, a beautiful webinar. I hope you would like it. And at the same time, please be focused. Please concentrate. I see no reason why you can't clear this exam. And what do you think of these changes? Are these changes good, bad, ugly? Let us know. But with hand on my heart, this is all for your benefit, nothing else. Sure? Great. Very nice. So let's get started and look at topic number 1, Yuan Wang 5. China is an expansionist power. It wants to expand its territory, or it wants to expand its influence. Now, what China has done, one vessel, one ship of China called Yuan Wang 5, it was supposed to dock at the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka on August 11. Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, this was constructed, developed using Chinese money. So China gave money to develop the infrastructure in this Hambantota port. And this is where you need to understand one concept known as debt trap. What is this debt trap? China gives money, financial assistance to the smaller, poorer countries in Asia. And when these smaller, poorer countries are unable to repay the loans, then China takes over that infrastructure which it has created, that port which it has created, that airport which it has created. And this is how the China is trapping all these smaller, poorer countries in our neighborhood into debt trap. So it is trapping these smaller countries in debt. One example of that is the Hambantota port. Sri Lanka is in economic crisis right now. It's in a financial mess. Hambantota port, to develop this, China gave the money. But in 2017, Sri Lanka realized that we will not be in a position to repay the loans that were given by China. And in 2017, the then government in Sri Lanka leased this Hambantota port to China for 99 years. So this Hambantota port is now leased to China for the period of 99 years. And this Chinese vessel, Yuan Wang 5, had to dock at this Hambantota port on 11th of August this year. But United States protested. United States said this is not a regular vessel, regular ship. This is basically a spy ship. India also protested. Because imagine China with its expansionist ideology, expansionist attitude, it is entering the Indian Ocean, reaching India's neighbor, Hambantota port. This ship can be a spy ship and can be used for surveillance on India as well. India also protested. Initially, Sri Lanka relented to the pressure of India, did not give the permission to this Chinese vessel to dock at the Hambantota port. But after a few days, China could no longer accept the pressure of India, it relented and gave permission to China to dock at Hambantota port. And on August 16, one day after India's independence, this ship docked at the Hambantota port, stayed there for 6 days, and then it is sailing back, according to newspaper reports. Now, this issue, what do you need to understand from this issue when it comes to the civil services examination? This Yuan Wang 5, it's basically a generic name. Yuan Wang is a generic name given to China's People's Liberation Army, PLA's Strategic Support Force. Yuan Wang, it's a generic name. It contains 6 to 8 vessels. One such vessel is Yuan Wang 5. And these vessels are part of Chinese Army's Strategic Support Force. On paper, what is the purpose? What is the objective of Yuan Wang? The purpose is research, conducting surveys in the ocean, research in the ocean, and at the same time, tracking and monitoring the space launches, tracking and monitoring the satellites as well. On paper, this is the purpose, this is the objective of Yuan Wang. This is the objective of these vessels, which are part of Chinese Strategic Support Force. But we can't trust China. Maybe these ships can also be used for surveillance, can be used for eavesdropping as well. So what do? We have to be cautious. We can't have a knee-jerk reaction and protest the coming in or the docking of this ship in India's neighborhood. Why? Reason number one, UNCLOS of 1982. For your prelims examination, you may be asked, is United States part of this United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea? But United States is not part of it. But India is, China is. And according to this UNCLOS of 1982, every vessel has unfettered power of navigation. Just like Chinese ship has the right to enter the Indian Ocean, Indian ships also have unfettered right to enter the South China Sea. So if the Chinese vessel is coming into the Indian Ocean and docking at the Hambantota port, merely on this ground, we cannot protest. Why? Because we are bound by UNCLOS. And under UNCLOS, ships have unfettered power to navigate in the open waters. That is why we have to be cautious. But at the same time, we can't trust China because of its expansionist attitude, ideology. Maybe this ship will be used for surveillance. Former Navy Chief of India, India's former Navy Chief, he wrote a brilliant article in the Indian Express. He said, even if this ship is used for surveillance, that doesn't mean we can protest. Why? Because surveillance is done by friendly nations, by the enemy nations as well. China is our enemy. China will do surveillance, but even the friendly nations, they resort to surveillance. United States is carrying out surveillance on its friends as well, and for decades now. So just because a ship is entering into the Indian Ocean, we may suspect that this is a spy ship. But for that, we have to be cautious. We have to hold our ground. We don't have to allow release or leak of sensitive information. But we can't protest. We can't force Sri Lanka not to allow this Chinese ship to dock at the Hambantota port because it would be a violation of UNCLOS. And at the same time, Sri Lanka is in a mess. We have supported Sri Lanka financially. Even IMF, International Monetary Fund, is supporting Sri Lanka. But at the same time, these helps from IMF and India alone are not going to help Sri Lanka come out of this economic mess. It needs Chinese help. It needs Chinese money. So we have to understand this from Sri Lanka's perspective as well. Sri Lanka cannot say no to the docking of this ship because its financial interests are clashing. Some experts in India also raised another question, that this violates India-Sri Lanka Accord of 1987. According to this accord, which was signed in 1987, both India as well as Sri Lanka, they have resolved that we will not let each other's territory, we will not let each other's soil to be used for those interests which are prejudicial to the unity, integrity, sovereignty of each other. Which means Sri Lanka will not allow its soil to be used against India's interests. India will not allow its soil to be used against Sri Lankan interest. So the position in India is Sri Lanka, by allowing this ship to dock at the Hambantota port, because this ship can be used for surveillance, can be used for eavesdropping, this has the potential of violating the interests of India. We need to also understand that at least on paper, this Chinese ship is not a warship. It is a civilian vessel. On paper, its primary objective is to track and monitor the satellite launches, the space stations, and at the same time, it is used for survey, monitoring, and research activities in the oceans. Then what do? China is a maritime great power. If you look at a few years ago, 2019, a defense white paper was released. The president of China, Xi Jinping, he has now given responsibility to the PLA Navy, People's Liberation Army, the Chinese PLA's Navy. Navy has been given responsibility to ensure the protection of maritime Silk Road, including CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which India is protesting because it passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And we claim, and we genuinely believe, that Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is an integral part of India. So this CPEC passing through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, it's violation of India's sovereignty, unity, integrity. But if Navy has been tasked by Xi Jinping to protect the maritime Silk Road, which means that Navy of China will be used to also ensure that we keep surveillance on India as well in the Indian Ocean. Then what do? We have to also become the maritime superpower. One interesting thing that comes out from this situation is the string of pearls. Series of strategic investments made by China in our neighborhood, which you all, I think, are aware of, that China is investing or has invested in a port in Myanmar, in a port in Chittagong in Bangladesh, Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, Gwadar port in Karachi. Now, draw the line, connect the dots. Basically, China is encircling India. And this is what is known as string of pearls. So we have to be cautious in our neighborhood. We have to be cautious in our Indian Ocean surrounding. But at the same time, look at China. Recently, and for quite some time, it is now conducting intense activity when it comes to space exploration. There are 50 space launches planned by China in 2022. In fact, a few months ago, 6 astronauts from China came back, returned to Earth after spending 3 astronauts, of China came back to Earth after spending 6 months at the space station. So the former Navy chief saying, maybe it is kosher, maybe it is legitimate that China is using this Yuanwang 5 for the research, for the survey, and the tracking of these space satellites and space launches. And India also, it is now going hyper. ISRO is launching more and more space projects. DRDO may also want to test fire Agni missile. And to test fire these satellites and the missiles, India would also want to use its Navy. India would also want to send its ships to the open waters to keep a track of these space launches and satellites. So if today we protest against Chinese vessels coming to India for quote-unquote survey, research, tomorrow how can we justify our intention when we will also want to send our ships into the ocean, into the deep waters, into the high seas, just to track, monitor our space stations and satellite launches? Long story short, Yuanwang 5 It had to dock at the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. India protested, United States protested. Sri Lanka ultimately relented, gave the permission to this ship to land, to dock at the Hambantota port. How do we deal with the situation? How do we look at the situation? Former Navy chief says we have to look at the situation through caution. We have to be cautious, and we have to also ensure that we do not violate the international agreements. One agreement is UNCLOS. On what grounds can we protest the docking of the civilian vessel or not warship vessel in Sri Lanka? Because if Chinese vessel has a right to enter the Indian Ocean, Indian vessel also has a right to enter the South Chinese Seas. And if it is, let's accept for the sake of the argument that China is genuine, China is using Yuan Wang 5 to track the satellite launches and to monitor the space stations. Tomorrow, India, because India has also the target of getting hyper aggressive, intense aggressive on its space launches, on its satellite launches, on its missile launches. And tomorrow we may also want to send our ships into the open waters to track these satellite launches or missile launches. So if today we protest against China, what defense would we have tomorrow when we will send our ships in the open seas? That is why former Navy chief says we have to look at this with caution. We have to avoid knee-jerk reaction. That's what you need to understand from this topic. And there is a question. You can write an answer to this question, send it to us, and we will evaluate. What is the question? India's response to the presence of Chinese military vessels in the Indian Ocean needs to be more calibrated. Discuss. And we have discussed how should we deal with the situation, because we will also have our own plans of launching satellites, missiles, and to track them, we also need to enter the deep oceans, into the high seas, and then track their movements. So today, if we protest, tomorrow we will have no justification. And we are bound by UNCLOS. And at the same time, we cannot trust China. So we have to hold our guard, we have to be cautious, and we have to ensure that sensitive information is not leaked. Done? Now, if you have questions, please let me know, then we will jump to another topic. The answer should be in 250 words. Please tell kosher. Kosher means legitimate. UNCLOS means United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea, which gives unfettered right to the Navy, to the civilian ships, to the vessels, to maneuver in the open waters, in the high seas. PLA means People's Liberation Army. Now let's look at something else. India-US Maritime Partnership. Recently, what has happened, one vessel from United States, it has docked at a facility in Chennai. And this facility is developed by Larsen and Toubro. Although this is not important for your exam, but something is significant here. What is significant is that this is for the first time that such a thing has happened in India. And when it is for the first time, it becomes significant for your civil services examination. The name of the ship is USNS Charles. It's a US Navy dry cargo ship. It has docked at a South Indian facility in Chennai, constructed by Larsen and Toubro. Now, why is it significant? It is significant because in April this year, April 2022, in 2+2 dialogue. Now, what is this 2+2 dialogue? Two important ministers from US, two important ministers from India, they hold talks with each other. Who are these two ministers? External Affairs Minister of India, Defense Minister of India. Similarly, the Defense Secretary of United States, Defense Minister, and the Secretary of State of United States is the External Affairs Minister of US. Two ministers from this side, two ministers from this side, they together communicate with each other so that India-US relationship becomes stronger day by day, so that the potential that we have in this relationship is matured. In April 2022, when this 2+2 dialogue took place, a significant decision was made. The decision was that India's shipyards will be used for the repair and maintenance of US Military Sea Lift Command. Make note of this. I'll tell you the significance slightly later. US Military Sea Lift Command. The ships, the vessels of this US Military Sea Lift Command will be used so that they dock at the India's shipyards for what? For repair and for maintenance. It never used to happen before. Previously, ships from US could dock at India's shipyards, but only for refuel. If you needed refueling, then you could have docked at India's shipyards. But now for the first time, we are saying that there will be an agreement, there will be a partnership where US Military Sea Lift Command ships will dock at India's shipyards, not only for refueling, but for repair and maintenance as well. This becomes significant. Significant also because in 2017, an agreement was signed between India and United States known as LEMO, Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement. What does that mean? Let me give you a hypothetical situation. This is India's ship. For example, tomorrow there is a war. This ship, it will have fuel to reach some nautical miles. But what if the ship wants to cross a significant distance and we don't have the territory which expands to a massive area? What if this Indian ship is there in some other ocean and there are other countries situated, but they are not allowing our ship to dock at their shipyard? What will we do? We cannot win a war. We cannot even supply our material to other countries. This is where it becomes interesting. Not only for refueling purposes, we are also now allowing US ships to dock at India's shipyards for repair and maintenance. Please understand, LEMO is not a basing agreement. Sir, what is a basing agreement? If there is a basing agreement, then United States Navy will also base itself on India's ports or India's shipyards. Navy military personnel cannot come and stay in India. Only their ships can come, get repaired, get maintenance, get refueling, then they have to go. They cannot be stationed in India. So it is not like tomorrow United States can make India its colony by having its troops, by having its military, by having its navy stay permanently stationed on India's shipyards. That cannot happen because LEMO is only logistical agreement. It is not a basing agreement. US Army, US military, US Navy, they cannot base their troops on India's shipyards. But why is this significant? You might be in a position to ask. 5-6 lines, 5-6 statements you have to explain in your answers, and your answer will fetch good marks. Number one, US, which is considered to be the world superpower with technological know-how, with best facilities, US ship wants to come to India and get itself repaired, get itself maintained. What does that mean? That means now United States and other countries, they have accepted the technological know-how of India. They are now starting to trust India's shipbuilding capabilities. They are now starting to trust the way our engineers are functioning. That means it is an endorsement of India's ship repair and ship building capability. That is the biggest takeaway from this docking of US ship in Tamil Nadu. Second, this development comes in the backdrop of a bigger development that has taken place. INS Vikrant. What is INS Vikrant? This is India's first indigenously constructed aircraft carrier. We need in the open ocean, in the open waters, we need a carrier which can also have airplanes, the lift which will be used for airplanes, warplanes to fly. That means in the open ocean, where there is no runway, there is no landing strip, we are using our indigenously own created aircraft carrier, which is INS Vikrant. That means countries around the world, they have now started trusting India, that India has this capability of constructing its own indigenous aircraft carrier, and it is now in a good position to build and repair these shipyards as well. That is the biggest takeaway. Another, this is the boost for Prime Minister Modi's Atmanirbhar Bharat. Become self-reliant. Don't rely on others, because forever they cannot be supporting you. We have to support ourselves. Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India. Make in India, make for the world. So we are making in India, and we are now supporting the world as well for repair and maintenance of their ships. And this is the biggest signal to Quad. What is Quad? China is rising, but China, look what China is doing in Taiwan. Look China, what it has done in Tibet. Look the kind of disputes China has with Japan, China has with South Korea. China is expansionist. How do we control the rise of China? For that, United States, because United States fear that if China rises, it's going to displace United States as the sole superpower of the world. Because right now we have, at least on paper, only United States as the sole superpower. If United States is gone, who is rising? China. How do United States counter China? United States needs India's neighbors to counter the rising China. For that, United States is now courting friendship of India, Japan. Japan was already their friend, but now courting Japan, South Korea, Australia, India to a large extent. Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, led to another conflict. But the point is, to counter the rise of China, Quad was announced. India, United States, Japan, Australia. But India was wary. India was apprehensive. India did not want to give signal to China that this agreement that we have made, this grouping that we have made, Quad, it's basically against China. We wanted China to get a sense that this is just an arrangement for economic understanding. This is an arrangement for business needs. India, United States, Japan, and Australia, they want to come together. This is just a business deal. This is just a business arrangement. It is not a military alliance against China. But now what is the biggest signal? The signal is US ship, previously used to dock in India for refueling only, now will dock in India for repair and maintenance. This is the biggest signal to China that we are considering Quad as a military alliance as well, or as a naval alliance as well. And at the same time, this is a good news for United States as well, because United States, their presence in Indian Ocean will be bolstered because of this agreement. Now look at it this way. What is the impact for India? If United States ships, they can come to India and dock at India's shipyards, United States has more than 80 naval bases throughout the world. So tomorrow, if our ships need some repair and maintenance, we can dock at the US base in Singapore, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Iraq, in other Middle East countries, far away in Pacific as well. So this is a win-win situation for both India as well as United States. And it is also a signal to China that now maybe other Quad countries will also use India's shipyards for their repair and maintenance, which means China will keep a track of these developments and basically say that, yes, now this is not just an economic alliance, it is a military alliance or a naval alliance. But at the same time, some other development has taken place, and let's link these developments together. What are these developments? We have NPT, the Treaty for the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, commonly known as Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. What is the purpose of this treaty? What is the objective of this treaty? To prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. Not only to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, to prevent the spread of nuclear weapon technology as well. Here is a country, one country. It has a nuclear weapon. Can this country sell its nuclear weapon to another country which does not have a nuclear weapon? No. This would be violation of NPT, because the purpose of NPT is to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. Second is not just nuclear weapons, weapon technology. So this country has the technological know-how, understanding of how to build nuclear weapons. What if this technology is shared with another country? That would be violation of NPT. So NPT's principal objective is to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, to prevent the spread of nuclear weapon technology. But at the same time, it has another objective. And the objective is to promote nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Sir, what is the peaceful purpose for which we can use nuclear energy? Electricity. Generation of electricity. That means nuclear technology can be used for the generation of electricity as well. For that, we will promote. This NPT was signed in the year 1970. And initially, the purpose of this NPT was that it will continue for 25 years. This treaty will continue for 25 years. Then in the year 1995, it was decided that we will extend this NPT for an indefinite period. For an indefinite time, there is no upper limit. And every 5 years, there is a review of this treaty at a conference known as Review Conference. NPT came into force in 1970, initially for a period of 25 years. 1995, it was decided that this treaty will extend for an indefinite period. Every 5 years, this treaty is reviewed, or the progress made by this treaty is reviewed at a conference known as the Review Conference. This conference was supposed to be held in 2020. But because of the COVID-19 situation, it could not be held. And last month, it was held in New York. And this is the significance of this review conference. And what is the significance? Let's discuss that. There are few countries which are not part of NPT. For example, North Korea initially was part of NPT, but in 2003, it decided to come out of NPT. Countries such as South Sudan, it's not part of NPT. Similarly, 3 big countries, big in terms of their power, they're not part of NPT. One is India, the other is Pakistan, and the third one is Israel. India has declared herself as a nuclear power. When the first test was conducted in Pokhran, known as Pokhran 1 in 1974, Shrimati Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. This nuclear explosion, India said it is a peaceful nuclear explosion. Peaceful nuclear explosion. What does that mean? Nothing. It means we are just telling the world that we have exploded something. It's a peaceful nuclear explosion. But we did not explain, we did not declare that we have tested a nuclear bomb. It was in Pokhran 2, 1998. Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. When nuclear explosion was conducted and India declared that now we are a nuclear power. So India declared herself as a nuclear power in 1998. Pakistan also declared herself as a nuclear power. The position of Israel is ambiguous, or we call it deliberate ambiguity. Israel does not accept that it has nuclear weapons, nor does it deny. So if you ask somebody from Israel, do you have nuclear weapons? He won't answer. He won't either say yes, nor does it say no. So Israel's position is ambiguous when it comes to nuclear weapons. But something happened. When the first test was conducted in 1974, United States started imposing sanctions on us. Why? Because you have not signed NPT. When you have not signed NPT, that means maybe you will use your technological know-how to tell other countries how to build a nuclear weapon. Maybe you'll also start selling nuclear weapon. You have to be part of NPT. India resisted. Sanctions were imposed. And the sanctions were such that we could not even buy uranium or import uranium even for our power plants, even for civilian purposes, non-military purposes. And the bigger sanctions were imposed in 1998 when India declared herself as a nuclear power. But after 1998, India decided that we need to change our approach, and rightly so. What is the change in approach? India said, now that we have tested the nuclear bomb, now let's focus on the consequences. Let's try and address these consequences one by one. And to address these consequences, in the year 1999, India released her nuclear doctrine. And what is India's nuclear doctrine? Minimum credible deterrence, coupled with no first use policy. What is your nuclear doctrine, Mr. Brijesh Mishra, one of the most powerful bureaucrats this country has ever seen? Brijesh Mishra, he was the National Security Advisor. He released this nuclear doctrine. And the doctrine said, we have developed nuclear weapons, but we don't want to attack somebody. We will have no first use policy. We will not use nuclear weapons in the first instance. But if somebody attacks us, if somebody uses nuclear weapons against us, we will then use our nuclear weapons. So our policy is no first use. We will not use nuclear weapons for the first time. And the reason why we have developed nuclear weapon is, look at our neighborhood. Pakistan has a nuclear weapon. China has a nuclear weapon. We are living in a hostile environment. And in this hostile environment, we need some safeguards. We need some deterrence so that other countries, they are deterred from attacking us. And for that minimum deterrence, we have exploded nuclear weapons. This was the policy, and this policy gained a lot of respect in international forum as well, because Indian policy was no first use. According to experts, what was the policy of United States? MAD. What is MAD? Mutual Assured Destruction. That means, according to experts, United States policy is that we will use nuclear weapons if somebody attacks us in such a manner that it leads to assured destruction, both of that country as well as us. We will not restrain ourselves. We will use nuclear weapons even if it leads to the destruction, mutual destruction of both the countries. But we are not mad. Our policy is no first use policy. We will not use nuclear weapons for the first time. We will use it only if we are attacked. Because we don't have nuclear weapons to attack others. We have nuclear weapons so that it acts as a deterrent to other countries, so that they are deterred from attacking us. This review conference, which was held last month in New York, the review conference on NPT, it did not release any significant outcome. No significant outcome could take place. No official document was released. Why official document was not released? Because people started protesting and accused Russia, because Russia has invaded Ukraine. In Ukraine, there is a very powerful nuclear power plant, which is now in the center of this conflict, center of the storm. So those who are part of NPT, they questioned Russia and Russia's involvement in Ukraine and this nuclear power plant. And Russia said, I will not allow you to release the document, which basically means no outcome could be found. Beyond my ability. Second, the issue that we have basis this review conference, one of India's foremost experts, C. Rajamohan, he writes frequently on international relations, defense, security. He says that there is a talk, there is this nuclear weapons discourse going on in the world right now because of the review conference on NPT. It raises two outcomes for us as Indians. Previously, whenever review conference would be conducted, India would watch it very keenly. What is the outcome of this review conference? Will we be asked again to join NPT or not? Now it seems that India is not concerned. But C. Rajamohan says, looking at this nuclear discourse which is going on in the world on nuclear weapons, there are two things that we have to keep in mind. What are the two things? Need to review no first use policy. Considering the rise of China, considering the threats that are given by Pakistan as well and other countries, we have to revise our nuclear doctrine, because it seems that when we say no first use, that we will not use nuclear weapons for the first time, it gives a sense to other countries that we are weak. We need to review it. Second, we also need to look at nuclear technology for our electricity needs. And this nuclear technology for our electricity needs will help us in our sustainable development goals as well. Climate change is a phenomenon. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it has an objective that by 2050, we should ensure that the global temperature should not rise beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade. For that, we need to move away from fossil fuels, to move away from coal for the generation of electricity. And what we can use nuclear technology. And this nuclear technology generating electricity is non-polluting as well, because it does not release carbon dioxide. Is carbon dioxide a pollutant? It's not. But carbon dioxide, it's not a pollutant because it is naturally occurring in the atmosphere. But at the same time, it is viewed as a greenhouse gas, because of which the temperature, because it leads to global warming. And this electricity generated by nuclear power plants, because it does not release carbon dioxide, which basically means it will be a contributor, a mitigating factor for climate change. For these two reasons, we need to have solid discourse on the use of nuclear technology in India, according to C. Rajamohan. So India-US strategic partnership, and at the same time, what is happening in Ukraine because of Russia's involvement, because Russia's involvement and United States together in 1970s led to NPT. Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. They were at war with each other, Cold War. Not even a single bullet was fired, but it was assumed that tomorrow there will be a war between United States and USSR. But even at the peak of the crisis between the two countries, one thing they both agreed with was NPT. That means they could not agree on anything else. But on NPT, they agreed. Because why should others have fun? Why should others build nuclear weapons so that our position, prestige is diminished? That's why they were trying to prevent other countries from developing nuclear weapons. And on one hand, we have a strategic relationship between India and the United States of America. United States of America has long been trying to pressurize India to join NPT. We have to look at both these things in isolation. We will continue to have strategic relationship with United States without United States pressurizing us to join NPT, because that is a no for us. We don't want to be bound by the NPT regime of the European powers. Another question for you. The India-US maritime relationship is yet to realize its true potential. Comment on the areas where improvement is needed for a robust relationship. And I told you at the start that keep note of this US Military Sea Lift Command. It does not include warship. Warships are not part of MSC. Warships of United States, they are not part of Maritime Sea Lift Command. If tomorrow there is an agreement or there is a development where US warships come to India, dock at India's shipyards for repair and maintenance, that would be the biggest relationship push between India and United States. So we don't only need normal civilian vessels or normal Navy vessels to dock at our shipyards. To lift this partnership, to build on this partnership, we need warships also to come to India, so that tomorrow our warships can dock at the US bases which are there in Middle East and other countries, so that tomorrow we can use those bases as well if need arises. That will be the military relationship between India and United States. Obviously, without any basing agreement, because we will not allow US Navy or military to be stationed on the soil of India or at the coast of India or at the shipyards of India. That completes our discussion on topic 2. Let's look at topic 3. But before that, let's look at the questions. Crystal clear. India has the brightest future in this world, without doubt. Is North Korea part of NPT? I said no. Quad is basically a group of 4 countries. Quadrilateral, for example. Quad. 4 countries. Sir, why today multiple choice questions are not asked? Because, my dear, today is Thursday. And Thursday is for mains-based current affairs. And in mains, MCQs are not asked. Okay. Now let's look at another important topic, the need for a refugee law. Rohingyas from Myanmar, because of the ethnic cleansing in Myanmar, because the regime there According to them, they're pressurizing them, forcing them, committing atrocities against them, whether it is the current military junta in Myanmar or it was the previous government of Aung San Suu Kyi. Aung San Suu Kyi's party was part of the government, was heading the government. There were ethnic violence committed against Rohingyas, who are predominantly Muslims. Some of these Rohingyas went to Bangladesh seeking refuge. Some of these came to India as well. Some are in Jammu, some are in Delhi. The problem is we do not recognize refugees. We do not have a domestic refugee law. And at the same time, a petition was filed in the Supreme Court asking that government should not deport these Rohingyas back to Myanmar. The Supreme Court rejected this petition. Supreme Court allowed the government of India to deport these Rohingyas back to Myanmar. After this, the Minister for Housing and Urban Development, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, he said that we will give residential opportunities, we will give some kind of support to these Rohingyas in Delhi. We will give them accommodation, we will give them United Nations Human Rights Commissions or Refugee Commissions ID cards as well. But within few hours, there was a clarification issued by the Home Ministry that there has been no such policy. We are not going to recognize Rohingyas. We are not going to give them ID cards. We are not going to give them accommodation. As per the Supreme Court, we have to deport them. This issue raised another important issue for our examination, which is the need for a domestic refugee law in India. Now, how do we look at this situation? According to United Nations estimates, there are close to 213,000 refugees or asylum seekers in India, those who are seeking asylum in India, those who are seeking residence in India. And this makes India one of the center of refugee movements. How? Look at our neighborhood and look at the location of India. We have Myanmar, where there is an ethnic conflict going on, ethnic cleansing going on. Rohingyas are disappearing, Rohingyas are migrating in large numbers. We have Sri Lanka in our neighborhood where there was an ethnic conflict. The Tamils were being persecuted by the Sinhala majority in Sri Lanka, by the Buddhist Sinhala majority. Sinhala is a language spoken by the majority in Sri Lanka. And the Sinhala speaking majority would commit atrocities on the minority Tamils. Ultimately, what happened? There was a civil war. This civil war was led by LTTE, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. They basically wanted a separate country in the eastern and northern part of Sri Lanka. So for Tamils, there should be a separate Eelam, separate country for the Tamils. Ultimately, in 2019, LTTE was defeated. Mahinda Rajapaksa was the president. LTTE was defeated. The civil war ended. But whatever it was, this conflict, ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka, led to the refugee movement in India as well. Not just that, the policies of China vis-a-vis Tibet, which led to the exodus of a large number of people from Tibet. Even the Dalai Lama came to India and is now in India. That also, this conflict in Tibet, China, also led to the influx of refugees to India. The political crisis in Afghanistan. Taliban took over Afghanistan last year. It's the first anniversary of the Taliban in Afghanistan. Then the minorities, predominantly Hindus and Sikhs, they were attacked. The Gurdwara was attacked. And ultimately, India had to accept these Sikhs and Hindu refugees to India, asylum seekers to India. So because of the conflict in our neighborhood, be it in Myanmar, be it in Sri Lanka, be it in Afghanistan, or be it the Chinese policy towards Tibet, the location of India is such that it is becoming, and it is at the center of the refugee movement. That is why we have close to 213,000 refugee or asylum seekers in India. But then there is a problem. The problem is India has not signed the United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugees of 1951, nor has it signed its additional protocol of 1967. What are these two things? This United Nations Convention, listen to me carefully, this United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugees, it defines who can seek asylum. Basically, who can seek protection by migrating from his country to another country. If I'm a war criminal, I will not be allowed as a refugee, according to this convention. But if I'm fleeing my country because of political persecution, because of religious persecution, because of ethnic persecution, I can be eligible for seeking refugee status in a different country. What are the rights of these refugees? What are the duties of the governments to protect the rights of these refugee seekers? All that is mentioned in United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugee, 1951. But this convention, its objective was different. It was basically targeting the European refugees, that too pre-1st January 1951. Sir, what are you saying? This United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugee, when it started in 1951, it was specifically focusing on those refugees who have been displaced in Europe because of the Second World War. So this convention sought to protect whom? Those who have faced displacement because of the Second World War. That is why there was a time constraint as well. And the time constraint was whoever has been displaced from his country before 1st January 1951, we will protect such refugees, we will protect such asylum seekers. That was the provision of United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugee, 1951. But then few years later, in 1967, an additional protocol was set up basis this convention. This protocol basically removed the space and time constraints. What does that mean? That means if United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugee 1951 was focused on those who have been displaced in the Second World War, those citizens belonging to the European countries, that too prior to 1951, now this additional protocol of 1961 says refugees everywhere, not just European refugees, everywhere. Not just those prior to 1951, but at any point in time. So this additional protocol is basically applicable to refugees anywhere in the world without any time constraint of prior to 1951. That means if you have been displaced after 1951 as well, you come under this protection. But India has not signed it. Why? I'll tell you the reason slightly later. When India has not signed this, that means there is no domestic law as well to protect these refugees. Which means not only has India not signed these international agreements on the refugees, but even in India, there is no law specifically focusing on the rights of refugees. Who can be a refugee in India? What are the duties of the state towards protecting these refugees? There exists no domestic law on this matter. Then what is the problem because of this? The problem is it leads to arbitrary treatment. What is the arbitrary treatment? For example, Rohingyas, the position of the government of India is that Rohingyas are illegal migrants. We will have to identify them and deport them back to Myanmar. But what about CAA of 2019? According to this law, Citizenship Amendment Act, if you are from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh, but you belong to Hindus, Christians, Jains, Buddhists, Parsis, we will give you protection, and at the same time, we may give you citizenship as well. So what it leads to when India has not signed international conventions on refugee, and there is no law which governs refugees in India, there is no domestic law, the problem that it creates is that refugees face arbitrary treatment, which basically means that Rohingyas are not allowed, but Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis, and Sikhs coming from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh, they are welcome in India. We will give you citizenship as well. And at the same time, it conflates two different categories of people: foreigners and refugees. Sir, what are you saying? There is a foreigner coming to India. This foreigner is required to abide certain laws. Which are these laws? Passport Entry into India Act, Registration of Foreigners Act. If people belonging to foreign countries, they want to come to India, they have to be bound by some laws in India dealing with foreigners. But foreigners come with valid visa. Foreigners come with valid passport. These refugee seekers, they don't have visa. They may not even have passport. So the problem is, if there is no refugee law, that means same law such as Foreigners Act, Passport Entry into India Act, Registration of Foreigners Act, these acts which are applicable to foreigners, we make the same acts applicable to refugees as well. And we conflate the two categories, foreigners and refugees. Foreigners come here for a variety of reasons on legal papers. Refugees, they come because they are fleeing their respective countries because of persecution, because their life is in danger in these countries. And unfortunately, we are equating both of them together. We are conflating both of them together. We treat both of them together. So the absence of a domestic law, what it leads to arbitrary treatment. Some refugees are not allowed, some refugees are allowed, and foreigners and refugees, we don't divide them, categorize them, we basically treat them together. That's the problem. But now the question on your mind, why India has not signed this convention? Officially, India has not given any reason. There is no official reason given by India as to why we have not signed this United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugee, 1951, or the additional protocol of 1967. But experts say we have not signed this convention because it is Eurocentric, because it was targeting European displacements during the Second World War, prior to 1951. That's why we did not sign it. Second is, there are resources, there are infrastructure in India, which basically is not sufficient for people of India, for the Indian citizens. And if we start accepting refugees as well, if we start accepting all the refugees unhindered, then it will be a huge burden on our infrastructure and our resources. That is why India has not signed these conventions or the protocol. And then there is a principle of non-refoulement. What is the principle of non-refoulement? Let's say, for example, there are Rohingyas. Rohingyas come from Myanmar. One principle of United Nations Convention on the Status of Refugee is the principle of non-refoulement, which says that if these Rohingyas, for example, come to India, India cannot deport these Rohingyas back to that country where their life is in danger. For example, I have migrated to India from Pakistan. Now the government, why I have migrated from Pakistan? Because my life is in danger in Pakistan. According to the principle of non-refoulement, India, where I have migrated, where I am a refugee, India cannot arrest and deport me and send me back to Pakistan because in Pakistan my life is in danger. India cannot send me to any other country where my life is in danger. This is principle of non-refoulement. But then how were Rohingyas allowed to be deported by the Supreme Court back to Myanmar because Rohingyas' lives are in danger in Myanmar? Because India is not a signatory to this convention, which means principle of non-refoulement is not applicable to us. It's not binding on us. But it's another matter that at least in two instances, one Gujarat High Court and then Delhi High Court. In both these instances, the Delhi High Court, the Gujarat High Court has said principle of non-refoulement is an integral part of Article 21 of the Constitution, which is right to life and right to live with dignity. And Article 21 is applicable to everybody, whether you are a citizen or an alien. Doesn't matter. Article 21 is applicable to you. And since it is applicable to you, that means principle of non-refoulement is an integral part of Article 21. But the Supreme Court did not accept this and ultimately allowed the central government to deport Rohingyas back to Myanmar. But be that as it may, 4 or 5 points you have to write in your answer if the question is asked on comment on the need to have a strong, humane, good refugee law in India. It is ultimately beneficial to India to have a domestic refugee law. That is why Dr. Shashi Tharoor, the member of the parliament, the member of Lok Sabha from Thiruvananthapuram, he has also introduced a private member's bill asking for a domestic law on refugees. But in less than 250 words, what is it that you can write? If we have a refugee law in India, we will gain international legitimacy. How? Because the world will say, look at India. India is giving refugee asylum status to people not on the basis of political whim or political preference, but on legal and humanitarian grounds. If we have a domestic law, we have always accepted refugees, even without signing the United Nations Convention. We've accepted refugees from Sri Lanka, from Tibet, from Afghanistan as well. But there needs to be a law because right now there is some kind of arbitrariness. Some kind of clarity is needed. So that if we have a humane domestic refugee law, we will gain international legitimacy because the world will think that India is a country where without any preference, without any political bias, without any political whim, people are given refugee status based on their legal and humanitarian grounds, not on political grounds. That means having a refugee law is in India's interest, is beneficial for India. Second is, it will cement India's reputation as a tolerant and secular state, where without any religious considerations, we are giving protection to those who are vulnerable, who are fleeing persecution, regardless of your religious grounds, regardless of your religion, regardless of your identity. We are giving you refugee status because you deserve protection. If that is mentioned in the law, It will cement India's position as a tolerant and a secular state. That means it is in India's interest. Third, having a strong refugee law where on set legal principles, on set grounds, on set rules, we will give refugee status to other countries, it will propel India to a leadership position in South Asia. Like a big brother who has a bigger heart to take care of the refugees from other countries. That means not only will India gain international legitimacy, will India cement its reputation as a tolerant and a secular state, it will propel India to a regional leadership role in South Asia. Fourth, it removes arbitrariness and uncertainty because some are allowed refugee status, others are not. Some are given protection, some are not. So it will remove ambiguity, it will remove arbitrariness, it will remove uncertainty. That is the advantage of having a domestic refugee law. And it will also reduce friction between the neighboring countries. At this point, you might find difficult to understand, sir, how does a strong domestic refugee law help reduce friction between neighboring countries? Look what has happened between India and Bangladesh. I'll tell you a story. India was facing hostile neighborhood for a long time. Bhutan was fast coming into the lap of China. In Nepal, under the prime ministership of the previous prime minister, Nepal was almost sailing in the lap of China. In fact, the then prime minister released a map in Nepal saying Kala Pani is Nepal's territory. Disputed nature. So Nepal, not a good relationship previously. Initially it was, then it strained for some time. Bhutan also strained for some time. Sri Lanka, when Mahinda Rajapaksa was the prime minister, Sri Lanka was again under the influence of China. It still is. Maldives, when President Abdullah Yameen was at the helm, was head of the government in Maldives, Maldives was also under the lap of China. In fact, there were 2 Dhruv helicopters which were given by India to Maldives. The then president said, take these Dhruv helicopters back, we don't need this, we have China. It is only now when Mr. Mohammad Ibrahim Saleh is the head of the government in Maldives that now relationship between India and Maldives is better. So we faced a hostile neighborhood. The one shining spot of our diplomacy was Bangladesh. One beautiful spot. In fact, the relationship became better and better and better, primarily because Sheikh Hasina was the prime minister of Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina's father was Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was the first head of government of Bangladesh when Bangladesh emerged as an independent entity. I don't know whether you know that story or not. Prior to 1971, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, he was all set to become the prime minister of Pakistan. Because Pakistan had East Pakistan and West Pakistan. East Pakistan, which is today's Bangladesh. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was a Bengali-speaking individual. In Pakistan, when Sheikh Mujibur Rahman almost won the election and he was about to become the prime minister of Pakistan, the Urdu-speaking, the Sindhis, the Punjabis of Pakistan said, how can a Bengali rule us? So language Bengali was not respected by Pakistan. Ultimately, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was arrested. And ultimately, it's a long story. Then India played a very important role, defeated Pakistani army in the 1971 war. It led to the emergence of Bangladesh as an independent country, and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman became the prime minister. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's daughter is Sheikh Hasina. So when India helped Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Sheikh Hasina as the head is now cementing good relations between Bangladesh and India. But there were 2 strains in our relationship with Bangladesh. One strain was CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act, wherein the law passed by the parliament said, if you are Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis, coming from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and you are facing religious persecution in Bangladesh, come to India, we will give you citizenship. Or if you have come to India, we will give you citizenship. So basically, you are accusing Bangladesh of torturing your minorities. Sheikh Hasina said, you're accusing us of persecuting our minorities. What are you saying? And ultimately, the finance minister of Bangladesh had to come to New Delhi after the CAA was passed. He cancelled the visit. So one strain in our relationship was CAA. The second was Rohingyas. Rohingya came from Myanmar. Some came to India. Majority went to Bangladesh. Bangladesh said, we don't have the capacity to take care of such a massive crowd of Rohingyas coming to Bangladesh. So we need India's help. India said no. If we had a strong and a proper domestic law, which would have clearly defined who will get the protection in India, what are the duties of the government, what are the rights of these individuals, this will reduce the friction that we might have with Bangladesh or other countries. Because Bangladesh would then realize that they have this law, and it is this law which is preventing them from accepting more refugees. That is why we accept your predicament. We accept your situation. So we need a strong, humane, domestic refugee law for these considerations. And that is what the question is asking you to write. A humane domestic law on refugees is beneficial to India's rise as a regional leader in South Asia. It will also reduce friction between neighboring countries. Comment. Any questions, please? Then we'll jump to another topic. Sir, is it true that Rohingyas don't have citizenship of any country? There are some Rohingyas which even Myanmar is not accepting that they are our citizens. Aditi says, crystal clear. Shreya says, no question, sir, clear. Pritam, what is your complaint? Please tell me. Got it, sir, crystal clear. All these questions, please write answers in 250 words. Perfectly understood. Very good. All clear. Thank you. 250 words. Shivanshi, your question is visible to me, but what is your question? Your statement is missing. Now let's look at fourth topic of discussion today. It was March 1994. One Indian military plane was landing at Tehran. Tehran is the capital of Iran. Who was coming out of this military airplane? The then External Affairs Minister, Dinesh Singh. Dinesh Singh was not in the pink of his health. He was struggling. He was ailing. But even then, he boarded India's military plane, flew to Tehran, landed in Tehran. Very ailing, he had a message. He had a letter from the then Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, and this letter was to be given to Iranian president. Sir, Indian Prime Minister could have telephoned the president. What was the need to send an ailing man, ailing minister? There is a difference between a telephonic conversation and a personal conversation. March 1994. And please understand, if it is 1994, we had faced a tumultuous situation in 1991. The BOP crisis, balance of payment crisis, when India had to give up its gold reserves for money, for dollars, because we were in a pathetic situation. There was a financial crisis in India. That's how International Monetary Fund came to our rescue. So on one hand, keep 1991 economic crisis in mind. Then keep 1994 when this military plane is landing in Tehran and the ailing defense external affairs minister is carrying a letter from Indian Prime Minister. This letter is to be given to the Iranian president. What is mentioned in this letter? Help us. Help us, why? Because there is OIC which is trying to get a resolution in United Nations Human Rights Commission. Once Human Rights Commission passes this resolution, it will be sent to United Nations Security Council, so that United Nations Security Council can impose economic sanctions on India. And what is OIC? Organization of Islamic Countries. Pakistan, other countries, European countries, influential European countries, they decided to gang together against India. Why? To protest what they called alleged human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir. For that, OIC had cleared some sort of a resolution which will be presented to the United Nations Human Rights Commission. This commission, this will be discussed in this Human Rights Commission, and ultimately this resolution will be presented to United Nations Security Council, so that United Nations Security Council can impose economic sanctions on India. And this comes at the backdrop of 1991 economic crisis. We were in a fix. What to do? OIC, the decisions at OIC are taken by consensus. So it's not like voting. How many people agree, how many members agree, majority, whatever majority says, we will go by that decision. They take decision by consensus. Everybody should agree. And this letter from Prime Minister Narasimha Rao via Dinesh Singh to Iranian president said, please help us back out. Iran backed out. So when there is no consensus inside OIC on this resolution could not be discussed, could not be used for economic sanctions against India. So India was saved a massive disaster. And in United Nations Human Rights Commission, another team was sent. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Salman Khurshid, Farooq Abdullah. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was in opposition. BJP, PV Narasimha Rao from Congress. A Congress Prime Minister sent an opposition BJP leader to defend India at the United Nations. And when they came back to a resounding welcome. Can you recall the welcome Indian team gets when they win a cricket tournament, or when they won the 1983 World Cup, or when they won the World Cup in 2007, or the resounding welcome that Indian team got after the winning of 2011 World Cup? Although it was in India, but in Mumbai, they went through a massive audience. The same welcome, which is reserved for which is reserved for cricketers, or which is reserved for Olympic medal holders, this resounding welcome was given to this group. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Salman Khurshid, Farooq Abdullah, when they came, because they won a victory at United Nations, because this resolution got defeated. Because at the last moment, Iran backed out. That is Iran and India friendship. Not just that. Look at Afghanistan. We discussed the Afghanistan issue many times in the past. There is also a video on our YouTube channel, The Return of Taliban, where I've explained the Talibani takeover of Afghanistan last year. Please watch that video lecture, should you wish to know what exactly happened. But be that as it may, When Taliban controlled Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001, it's not that the entire Afghanistan was captured by Taliban. There was one area, Northern Alliance, which was not under the control of Taliban. Taliban, they are Pashtuns, but there are other tribes in Afghanistan. This is a question which was asked to one of our students at the UPSC interview in the personality test. The question was on Afghanistan. The question basically said, why is Afghanistan so medieval? Why is there lack of development? And our student said, it's because Afghanistan is a tribal country, basically. It consists of number of tribes. And the interviewer asked, can you name some of the tribes? But this student could not answer. That is why you have to prepare for prelims, mains, personalities test together. Afghanistan has a lot of tribes. Pashtuns are predominant, Tajiks, Uzbeks, and others. Pashtuns are Taliban. So Taliban controlled, which basically means Pashtuns control a major Afghanistan in 1996, 2001. But the Northern Alliance was basically Tajiks. There were some leaders such as Burhanuddin Rabbani, leaders such as Abdur Rashid Dostum, leaders such as various leaders. And ultimately what happened, Iran, India was supporting Northern Alliance against Taliban. That is India-Iran relationship. And the most beautiful aspect of today's India-Iran relationship is Chabahar port. It was in the news last month. Why was it in the news? Because Iran said, we are seeking long-term contract with India for the development of Chabahar port. What is this Chabahar port? Look at the strategic location of this Chabahar. I told you previously about the string of pearls. Investment of China in Myanmar, Sittwe port, in Chittagong, Bangladesh, in Hambantota, Sri Lanka, in Gwadar, Pakistan. Basically encircling India. This is India. India wants access to Afghanistan. What is the route? Through Pakistan. But Pakistan is never our friend. Pakistan is blocking access. What if we need access to Afghanistan? Afghanistan is a landlocked country. It is surrounded by landmass on all its sides. So if India wants access to Afghanistan, through Afghanistan to Central Asia, then possibly Russia as well, we need to have an alternate route. And that alternate route to take India to Afghanistan, then to Central Asia, then possibly to Russia as well, is this Chabahar port in Iran, which India is constructing. It is operational right now, but it has still not achieved its full potential. Why? We will discuss that. But the point is, this India and Chabahar has an important link. But something happened. July 2022, a rail link was inaugurated in Chabahar. A rail link from Chabahar port to Zahedan, which is on the border of Afghanistan. This rail link, inauguration of this rail link took place. But India is not part of this rail link. Despite the fact that since 2003, India is trying to help in the construction of this rail link from the Chabahar port to Zahedan on the border of Afghanistan. Investment on Chabahar requires a lot of money. But India is not worried about money. India is weighing options in Chabahar because of the strategic importance Chabahar brings to India. So we are not worried about the money that we are spending. Yet, the non-inclusion of India in this railway link track from Chabahar port to Zahedan, which is on the border of Afghanistan, it said something important. And that is why Iran is saying we need long-term contract with India for the development of Chabahar. What all do you need to know on this topic? Let's discuss. First, you need to understand what is the significance of Chabahar. because students often read unnecessary things about Chabahar and then assume that we have covered this topic. First, understand the root cause. What is the significance of Chabahar to India? Number one, it provides an alternative route to Afghanistan, then to Central Asia, and then possibly to Russia as well. That's significance number one. Second, it is our strategic counter to the Gwadar port. Imagine Chinese warships docking at Gwadar port, about to launch an attack on India. We have to counter them as well. If Chabahar port we can use for our warships as well, not now, maybe later, for our warships as well, we will be in a position to counter the Chinese influence on Gwadar. That is another significance of Chabahar for India. Third, it will give a boost to India's imports, the energy imports that we bring in, petroleum, gas. It will give a boost to our imports as well as the exports that we send to far countries, because the strategic location of Chabahar port, because Chabahar is located on the edge of the Indian Ocean. And it is the only deep sea port in Iran which has direct access to ocean. And it is a port which is exempt from US sanctions. What does that mean? What are these US sanctions? Donald Trump was the president. A law was passed in United States known as CAATSA. What is CAATSA? Countering America's adversaries through Sanctions Act. How do we counter the adversaries or the enemies of United States? Through sanctions. That is what is known as CAATSA. Who are the adversaries or enemies of United States? Three countries: North Korea, Russia, Iran. According to CAATSA, if any country conducts transaction of significant nature, significant amount with these adversaries of United States government will have the power to impose sanctions on those countries, Iran included. But look at the significance of this Chabahar port. It is only port in Iran which is exempt from United States sanctions. That is why India is investing in Chabahar. And at the same time, you need to ask, why is there a delay? Why is there a delay in the laying down of this railway track? Now India is excluded from this. And Chabahar, only one part is functional, which has been given to India. But other parts of this Chabahar port are still not functional. A lot of investment is required. And that is why Iran is seeking a long-term contract with India for the development of the Chabahar port. What is leading to this delay? One is CAATSA, because we never knew whether Chabahar port or the railway track will be exempt from US sanctions or not. Later, special waiver was given to Chabahar port as well as this railway line. Special waiver was given by United States. That means even if countries carry on development of this railway line and port, we will not impose sanctions on those countries. Another thing is, if we deal more with Iran, we are antagonizing Israel, Saudi Arabia, and United States of America. You would recall that in 2015, a landmark agreement was signed, known as Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. This JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, is also known as Iran Nuclear Deal, where basically limitations were imposed on Iran so that you don't develop nuclear weapon. Its uranium enrichment program was curtailed so that you cannot enrich uranium to have weapons grade, because uranium, once it is enriched more than 20%, then it becomes ready to be made a nuclear weapon. So the restriction was imposed on uranium enrichment program on Iran. And in return, sanctions could have been revoked. Because for long, the world is accusing, whether rightly or wrongly, I don't know, the world is accusing predominantly United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. They're accusing Iran of developing a nuclear bomb. And ultimately, it will tilt the balance in Middle East in favor of Iran. Iran is a very important strategic player because of its location. At the same time, its population, which is young. And at the same time, Iran is facing numerous sanctions from United States and other countries, primarily because world thinks that Iran is making nuclear weapons. So look at the airline industry of Iran. It's crippled because of the sanctions. That is why when India bought oil from Iran, India paid money to Iran in rupee, not in dollar. But when in 2017-18, Donald Trump withdrew from this Iran nuclear deal, Donald Trump, United States asked everybody not to buy oil from Iran. Iran was our third largest supplier of oil. And from third largest supplier of oil, we reached a point where we did not import any oil from Iran. I don't have an answer for that. Which basically means that this delay in the construction, development, and realizing the full potential of Chabahar port is because of various reasons. One is CAATSA, the third is the withdrawal of Indo-Iran nuclear deal or joint comprehensive plan of action. But in 2016, Prime Minister Modi was part of this. International transport and transit corridor was established between Afghanistan, Iran, and India. And at that time, a special waiver was given to Chabahar port as well as a railway line. But even after this waiver, we have seen slow progress on the development of Chabahar. So now we need to invest heavily in Chabahar and counter China. Because China wants to step in. Because the location of this Chabahar port right close to Gwadar will give a strategic push to China. And China and Iran, they are coming closer to each other. So we should not waste this opportunity and step in quickly. Otherwise, China will occupy the space. And do you know what has happened recently? Iran has been given membership status or observer status to Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well. Which means the closeness Iran and China are coming closer to each other. The closeness with which the two countries operate. And it is high time that India smells the coffee, starts investing heavily in Chabahar so that it realizes its true potential. That's the question that you have to answer. Both India and China seek to use Chabahar for their own strategic interests. Comment on the significance of the port for India's security and energy needs. Let me know if you have questions, and then we'll jump to the last topic. Sir, why Iran is asked to reduce its nuclear power technology? What if nuclear power country like US attack on Iran? How will Iran defend? Call it hegemony of United States, or call it a genuine concern to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Call it the hypocrisy of United States, or call it the concern of the world to not disrupt the balance of power in Middle East. Why? Saudi Arabia, a Muslim majority country, is against Iran, anti-Iran. Why? Because Saudi Arabia is Sunni dominated. Iran is Shia dominated. Saudi Arabia, Israel, and United States, they have formed one gang to prevent the rise of Iran. And that is why Iran is looking for other opportunities, building engagements with China, involving Russia as well, so that these countries can counter Israel, Saudi Arabia, and United States. So it's a power play going on in Middle East. Every country is trying to have its own strategic influence in this vital sector because of oil, because of the energy needs. Amit asks, why alternate ways are India shares boundary with Afghanistan also? Yes, but technically no. In a sense, Pakistan occupied Kashmir shares boundary with Afghanistan. Unless and until India takes over Pakistan occupied Kashmir, there is no direct link between India and Afghanistan. That is why we need an alternative route. Didn't get the issue of CAATSA imposed on Iran. CAATSA is United States law which allows the US government to counter the adversaries of United States. So I have to counter the adversaries of United States. Who are these adversaries? Iran, North Korea, and Russia. How do I counter them? By imposing sanctions. So any country, if it deals with Iran, North Korea, Russia, sanctions will be imposed on these countries. But sometimes United States also gives waiver. That means, okay, even if you deal with Russia, we will not impose sanctions on you. One beautiful example is that of S-400 defense system, which is considered to be the highly sophisticated defense system that world has ever seen. It is made by Russia, given to China as well, given to Turkey as well. India has also bought this. So India is conducting transaction of a significant nature with Russia by buying S-400 defense system. But no sanctions are imposed on India under CAATSA. Because India, after all, is not the country it used to be. It is now a powerful country with vibrant economy and at the same time a good market for US products. Okay. Now let's look at the last topic. It's a smaller topic, nevertheless needs an important mention because you would know, maybe I told you in the beginning or not, we also reduced the timing of these, the duration of these webinars because it used to stretch a lot. Students also, because daily work and then attending 2.5 hour class may not be fruitful. We have reduced the duration from 2.3 hours, 2.5 hours to 2 hours. So the webinar will be from 8:30 to 10:30. Pranil, your questions are visible, but what's your question? Manual scavenging. George Orwell wrote a book called Animal Farm, one of the best literary works, fiction works ever, according to me. In that he writes all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. In India, we don't treat all people equally. Some people don't deserve dignity, don't deserve respect. And unfortunately, those are the members belonging to the Dalit community. And it is the members of the Dalit community, 97% of manual scavengers are from Dalit community. Who are these manual scavengers? There are pits, there are septic tanks which are cleaned, imagine, which are cleaned by people belonging to a specific caste manually. They jump into the septic tank, clear it, and there are hundreds of deaths which have taken place because of the poisonous gases that emanate from this septic tank. And when we ask the government of India how many deaths have taken place, they say 0. Why? Because in 2013, Manual Scavenging Act was passed, which prohibits manual scavenging. So we don't have manual scavenging. Technically, yes, no deaths because of manual scavenging, but in reality, deaths take place. And more than 1,000 deaths have taken place, and the most recent death in Tamil Nadu. Manual scavenging is prohibited by the law in India, but it is allowed in extreme conditions. Extreme conditions, why? If equipments cannot be used to solve the problem, there is a septic tank, we need to clean it, but we cannot use equipments for whatever reason. Maybe no equipment is available, maybe equipment is not useful in such a situation. For that, we will have manual scavengers who will manually enter and clean the septic tank. This is one instance where manual scavenging is allowed. Or in other cases, where it is necessary to have human intervention. Maybe in a septic tank, there is some blockade. Equipments cannot be used. Robots cannot be used to remove that blockade. Manual intervention is required to remove that blockade. In such conditions, manual scavenging is allowed or manual cleaning is allowed. But this should be done by giving protective gear to these individuals who clean the dirt. That is why Tamil Nadu has released a list of must things that should be provided. If at all, manually we have to clean the septic tank. And that is why we say this should be extended, expanded throughout the country. So that one, there is no need for manual scavenging. Even if there is a need, extreme need, give protective gear to the members who are involved in the manual cleaning of this dirt. What is this protective gear? Give airline breathing apparatus. Give airline respirator as well. Air purifier gas mask, because of the toxic gases which come from this septic tank. That is leading to the deaths of the manual scavengers. Give a device for artificial respiration. Give a mask and breathing apparatus. All this should be provided to those, if at all it is needed, for manual intervention in cleaning of the septic tanks. Because there has to be dignity involved in any occupation. We should be thankful to these members, those who are cleaning our dirt. But we have to attach some amount of dignity to what they are doing as well. And the least we can do is to impress upon the government to have the protective gear given to these members so that they don't die in cleaning our dirt, our filth. Even if manual scavenging has been eradicated by law, the practice is still prevalent. And this is widely associated with the caste system, where members belonging, 97% of the manual scavengers, they belong to the Dalit community. On one hand, we should abolish this, and at the same time, we should rehabilitate these manual scavengers in other occupations, in occupations of dignity, providing their children education so that they lead a dignified life. Because in our system, when we say that we are fast becoming a developed nation, we should never see the reason why our septic tanks or sewers are cleaned by the people manually. Use robotics, use dry pit latrines, ensure that we don't need manual intervention to solve this problem and to clean our dirt. That was the last topic that we had to discuss, and there is a question for you. Manual scavenging is an assault on the human dignity and needs to be eradicated. Justify. These were the 5 topics that we had to discuss today. Once the webinar is over, you'll also be asked to provide the feedback. And provide the feedback, should you wish to provide it. 5-star means you like this class. Anything below 5 means you hated this class. So let me know. Thank you so much for being with us. Hope to see again next Tuesday and Thursday every time. All the best. Good night. Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.